Right. Hi, everyone. How we doing? Feels good to be talking to you in this capacity. Feels like it's been a while. You are watching the line review video for the most epic mission I've ever done. The mission across England. The straight line mission across England. And in this video, I'm going to be talking about deviations, how much I deviated and why, whether I could have made better decisions in the planning stage to avoid certain deviations, the Burdell score, which I don't mention often in the edits, but it's another way of scoring the line, basically, rather than just platinum, gold, silver. Gives it a score. And I'm also briefly going to mention Archie and Adam's attempt and what's coming up on this channel in terms of straight line missions and adventures in general. At the end of this video, I'm also going to urge you to ask me a question in the comments, a burning question that you have, and from all of those questions I will make a Q&A video. So here is the line. It is slightly more of a wiggly one than maybe I've had in the past, but when you zoom out and you see just how wide the country is, we're looking at a straight line. It's always a beautiful sight to look at. There we go, look. It does get wiggly towards the end, which we'll have a look at in a minute, but I just like to hover around it a bit. Right, let's have a zoom in and take a look at some of those deviations then. Now, I did mention in the series that this was about getting it done. This was about becoming the first person to cross England, and as a result, my effort to stick super close to the line was not as strong as it had been in previous missions. Maybe not the first mission I ever did, but the ones in between. Archie and Adam took a different approach. They took more risks. And they got collared by 4 farmers. 1 of them angry, 3 of them not. I didn't want to take those risks. I just wanted to keep the risks to a minimum. Having said that, I started off pretty normal, actually. This first day is pretty normal. Yes, there was the odd wide gate, as you can see here, or a gap in the hedge. But at this point, I hadn't left the platinum zone, so that gives you an extra incentive to hug the line. These are all sort of 12-meter deviations, which can happen in a woodland here quite easily because of signal. So you don't worry too much about these 10 or 12-meter deviations, especially when they're stopping you from tangling with a nasty hedgerow and potentially being stalled up in farmland and damaging a hedgerow even. That's something I really try to avoid now too. Track to farm was executed brilliantly, and that was a 17-meter deviation. I will take those all day long. This one here almost put me out the platinum zone. That's a 24.5 meter deviation. So this theme continues through the farmland. I'm doing my best to hug the line. Quite a few near misses with farmers, including this one here, where the van saw me. And really just getting through it. It was a great day. I really got through all this very, very well. I was also pleased with how stealthy I was. And this all changes when we hit this forest. The wiggles really begin here because of the fallen trees and the signal to an extent. The fallen trees start here, but despite a lot of wiggling, I still don't leave the platinum zone. 23 meters there and a similar distance here too. That was possible because the logs were dry. And this is what Archie and Adam managed to do as well with their fallen tree sections. Their logs were dry, so it's climbable. I'll talk about that a bit later on. And we had more fallen trees where I managed to stay even close to the line. And it was only when I got into the farmland, that's a very clumsy deviation there. 17 meters just from presumably switching off, talking to the camera and just walking in slightly the wrong direction. Well, not slightly. But it was over here that I left the platinum zone. And in hindsight, I wish I hadn't. But I was being cautious because there were so many windows here. I just felt like it was very likely I'd be seen. 28 meters. And I was into gold from that moment on. Now that doesn't mean that I'm going to go, oh, I'm in gold now. I can go 30 or 40 meters. But what it does mean is I'm going to take less risks in order to stay in the platinum zone, or less than 28 meters, what I've already got. It depends how hot the situation is. Another big deviation there for the dogs. That was funny. Now day 2, because we're in trees again, this is going to be wiggly. There's no avoiding that because of the signal in the trees. But if I remember rightly, there were no real serious deviations until a bit later on in the day. So working my way through all this short pine, the fallen trees were quite favourable, but we're going to go over the moors here and here. This is roughly the area where I've lost my phone. Just quickly on the phone situation, I did go back and search for it with Ben. The footage for that will be on my Patreon. Not quite yet, it's almost there. Yeah, this is where I went just out of the gold zone, 53 meters. It's annoying because I probably could have, if I really knew that I was just 3 meters to the right, I probably would have persevered and stayed within that gold zone. But time was against me, and quite frankly, I thought that there was plenty more to come, which there was. The reason I couldn't stick to the line there was because the logs were sopping wet on this day. It had rained all day. And that was the biggest deviation that day, because after that, although it is a bit wiggly, and that's not just iffy signal, this is me trying to negotiate small patches of fallen trees, but also just making sure that I get there on time. For example, this river I chose to avoid, didn't I? And go over the bridge, and that was 21 meters off. You know, I didn't want to soak myself head to toe because my body temperature was dropping, for example. So little decisions like that to make sure we get to the van, because camping spots in these areas were far and few between. Right, day 3, and it is the same again. We crossed the lake. We're slightly to the left of the line, but that's okay. Same story on day 3, wiggly, but I mean, I say wiggly, these are sort of 10 meter, 10, 12, 13 meter deviations, sometimes 15, all the way through this day. Really good on the moors, no signal problems to stop you. That was great. Even on the moors, I was a little bit more wiggly than usual, just from trying to move that bit quicker. Wiggly, wiggly, wiggly in here. And again, just like the day before, I hit some fallen trees late on. This one was 42 meters, because if we look at the most up-to-date imagery, no, we can't on Google Earth. This is the problem. Maybe you can just see it there. I straddled the edge, didn't I? I straddled the edge. So day 3 was gold, whereas day 2 was technically silver. Now, straight away on day 4, we have a deviation that is awful, and I didn't think it was this bad at the time. I don't know whether the signal was playing up a bit at this point. It seemed to be a bit off, but either way, there was a huge patch of fallen trees here, and I just had to keep going to the right. And once I'd committed, I had to keep going because I had to cross Otterburn before dark, before 9 a.m. Sorry. So getting to this edge here was imperative, and that was a factor in me rushing this and just doing it in the dark as well. Some of you at this point are probably wondering, why don't you just do the whole thing slower and just do it over 8 or 9 days and just camp out every sort of 7 miles? Well, firstly, that would involve you being out here for 8 or 9 or 10 days. I don't really want to be doing that. Verity and Ben don't, well, they haven't got time to be doing that, and I wouldn't want to put them through it. And imagine getting caught by a farmer on day 9. It doesn't bear thinking about. But it's not just that, it's the logistics of the camp spots as well. So that was rushed, but just surviving with a 71 meter deviation. That was the biggest deviation at the time. No, it's 67. 67, sorry. So at that point, when you look at that horrible slab of deviation, it really is at this point just about getting to the end and making sure I don't fail. Over we go, Otterburn, and the moors here from here on in. This is just great stuff. No deviations above 15 meters apart from this one. This one was annoying because for some reason I thought the bridge was 22 meters and it was actually 27. So I'm leaving the platinum zone there when I don't need to. I could have crossed the river and got wet again, but so that's an example of how at this point I've actually voluntarily kind of left the platinum zone, something I would never dream of doing. Missioner's Drift here on the hill. We could get the terrain on. That is an absolute slab. And we've got Kidland Forest. The worst 4 hours of missioning. Was it 4? Yeah, 4 hours I think I've ever done. The hardest anyway. Yeah, the deviations in here are bad, aren't they? This one, miracle I didn't deviate further there. And then moving on, these were just awful deviations, but even worse areas. And I think I said at the end, I was just glad to have gotten through it and still be in any sort of zone. This one being absolutely on the cusp of bronze, and the next one going into bronze. But I have to reiterate that I do feel quite strongly that 100 meters is a fail. So to stay 78 meters was better than nothing. I was still alive. I was limping, but I was still alive. After that, we have a couple of deviations that I was a bit disappointed with at the hunting estate, but I'm sure you'll agree there was reason to be fearful in here with all those guns going off and dogs barking and whatnot and people waving flags. And I again, I have to admit the fact that I've already deviated 78 meters does have an impact on my decision making here. If I was still in the platinum zone, well, if I was still in the gold zone, there's no way I would have gone that wide. Because this was 53 meters, was it? Yeah. There's no way I would have been more cautious. If I was still in platinum, I don't know. I honestly don't know. Maybe that would have been the moment I went into gold. But after that, guys, it's much of the same. Still trying to stick to that line when I can, whenever I can. Little bits here and there in some ravines. Little bit wide at this farm. 18 meters. But, you know, I want you to know that I'm still trying when I can. I'm not just giving up. I'm trying to stick close. It's just, if anything is a risk at this point, you know, here, for example, an impassable hedge that I would have had to damage to get through. So I find a gap 22 meters off because I've got a farm coming up that I need to get past. This one here. But the terrible deviations were not over, much to my dismay. And this is the longest significant deviation of the lot. It was 72 meters to the south in the end. But this was by far the worst patch of fallen trees in the whole trip. So again, proud to have survived. I feel like someone who was expected to get a gold medal but got a bronze. I'm watching too much Olympics. I've got a medal, I've still done it, but I've had to compromise on the colour. And all the way up to the end here, it is, yeah, it's 20 meters max stuff. And all of this was in the dark, of course. All the way up to there, where I had to go around this pond, 25 meters. So that is the deviations, guys. They're not great. They're not great, are they? But they're not great because of the fallen trees. And this brings me on to my next point. Should I have plotted my line through more farmland to avoid all of this green that you see? My line was plotted to sweep up as much of this green, these bits here, these bits here, even these bits here, because I know that's farmer free. That's the reason. Should I have plotted it a bit more like Archie and Adam's, let's say like that, you know, avoiding these bits, but not avoiding more farms. Avoiding Kidland Forest, but again taking in more fields here. And then at the end, avoiding this forest and hunting estate, but just going through loads more farmers' fields? The answer isn't black and white, because you're talking about highly increasing the risk of being caught by farmers. Now, what I should have done, at the very least, is got a scout, maybe Ben, to go out there with a drone and to survey all of the fallen tree sections on my line and tweak it. But even if I'd have got the drone, extensively scouting the area, I still, I think, would have had to go through a lot of fallen trees, because Kidland Forest was full of them. This forest here is literally an ocean of fallen trees. So I don't think there would have been much avoiding the fallen trees unless I was to plot my line significantly further south, for example. And if you think about it, I was at the mercy of the weather, because let's say it was raining on this last day, I think I would have failed, genuinely. It would have been the most heartbreaking thing ever. Let's say, for argument's sake, that I failed this mission and I had to do it again next January. I probably would pick a line more like Archie and Adam's, purely because I don't know what the weather's going to do, and the fallen trees probably aren't going to have been cleared up. So that answers your question. My plan was flawed. I got lucky. This is a greater success than maybe people think. And that brings me on to Archie and Adam's success. They got platinum, and I couldn't believe it at the time. But no, they did it. And I cannot tell you how much of an achievement that is. To stick that closely to the line throughout all the obstacles they had, and to be so bold and brave through the farmland, not really doing it in the dark, going close to farmyards, I've got to take my hats off to them. They took more risks. And I knew that would be the case. I knew that would be the case because of the way I wanted to do my attempt. I will say this though, that they had far less fallen trees than me, which is better planning, you could argue. But also they did, I've got to say this because they never mentioned it, they did get lucky with the weather in those fallen trees. Because honestly, I don't know, you'll have to ask them I did ask them actually what they would have done if it had been raining in the fallen tree section, and their answer was they didn't know. They didn't say whether they would or wouldn't have gone through it. They would have been stupid to go through it though. So hats off to Archie and Adam. They truly are masters of the straight line mission. Now I'm going to talk about my next missions and how I'm going to approach them differently in a few minutes. But let's first do something that a lot of people have been asking me to do. A lot of you commenting this. And it is the potential to tweak the line itself, not my path is the blue one, to change the line post-mission so that a bronze run turns into a silver run. Now it sounds controversial, and that's because it is, but I get this school of thought. There's no there's no rules here. I kind of have made the rules historically, but this is something I've never been keen on doing. As you can see here, I've made a silver line. On the east side, it's further north, and on the west side, it's also slightly further north. So basically, I've budged it up about 4 meters the whole way. And the reason I've done that is as follows. The main deviation, as we know, is this one, 78 meters to the north. So if I move the line up by 4 meters, in theory, we should be now 74.9. I could probably tweak this a bit better to get it a bit better, but 74.9. So all of a sudden, we're in the silver zone again. But what about the other deviations? Because they weren't all north of the line. Because we had this one at the start of day 5, which was 67 meters south of the line. But that's not really big enough to affect this. It's this one, 72 meters south of the line, that is the make or break here. So this is the moment of truth. We've seen that the other one is now okay. What about this one? And there you go, 74.53. We're still in the silver zone, even though I've bumped the line up north. So this answers your question. Yes, I can tweak the line post-mission to make it silver. However, I don't really like it. I think it makes a mockery of the entire mission. Everything I've tried to go through was slightly to the right of this new line. My average positioning in relation to the line goes way off. It increases effectively by 4 meters the whole way. Some of the deviations get a bit smaller, but most of them get bigger. And of course, the Burdell score, which we're going to move on to next, quite briefly, gets even more decimated than it already was. What I would suggest then is that this was a bronze run with an asterisk next to it. A technical silver. Bronze, but it's a technical silver, or a post-mission silver. I don't know. We're just making the rules up as we go along here, but I do think that you're right that this needs to be talked about at least. But it's a definite asterisk for me. It's not, yeah, that was silver. I don't think so. Unless the Burdell score was so bad that it could not be made any worse. Right, drum roll please. Yay! 0. The Burdell score for this mission was 0. Here's why. The way the Burdell score works, and this is the way that me and Burdell, the guy who actually did the maths for this, thank you Burdell if you're watching, the further you go from the line at any given moment, the more your score will be punished. So if you go 80 meters from the line just once and come straight back, your score will take quite a big hit. And simply put, what's happened here is I've spent far too many individual meters, because it's measured in individual meters, as you can see here. At this particular meter I'm 75 meters away. At this one I'm 74. At this one I'm 70. And there's far too many instances or meters where I'm too far from the line, and it's absolutely decimated my score to the point where it's reached 0. Now, does that mean I failed the mission? No. Does it mean we have to take a look at the Burdell score? Possibly, because we want it to be relevant. So going forward, either we just keep this exactly the same and just say your Burdell score was 0 but you succeeded in your mission, or we say no, let's make it so that this was like a 0.4, not 0.04 score or something somehow. I don't know, because I think it's important that the Burdell score plays a part. It might just need tweaking at some point in light of this, especially when the mission is so long. If we ignore the worst 10% of individual deviations meter by meter, the score is 93.57. If we ignore the worst 5%, the score is 0. Interesting. What's my score as an amateur? 17.31. Score as a newbie, 87.85. I got a respectable score for someone who'd never done this before. Seems ridiculous, but this system was set up to stop people meandering willy-nilly, and paying no regard to the line. And these huge fallen tree sections have just obliterated the score. It's as simple as that. But it does beg the question, what is a fail and what isn't? Because I remember a while back, this Scottish pair completed UK's longest straight line challenge. Now what this was, it was a straight line across the Cairngorm Mountains in Scotland. They were trying, it was 48.8 miles, a long way, and their aim was to straight line the longest distance in the UK that doesn't have a road. So the longest possible roadless straight line, and it was an incredible feat because it's so mountainous. Here it is. And Callum and Jenny contacted me, and they had entered their line into the Score My Line website, the Burdell score, and it had come up as 0. But they had deviated a maximum of 120 meters, I think, which ordinarily I would consider a fail personally for the types of things I do. I wanted to make it clear to them that I didn't think their endeavour was a fail. Because the only reason they deviated was because of like really steep like cliffs and mountainsides. So I think what I'm trying to say is it's not a cut and dry thing. A success is what you deem to be a success, and certainly this article here in The Guardian considers this a success, as did I. You know, they crossed it, they may have deviated 120 metres, but really it depends on the size of the endeavour that you are carrying out. If someone attempted to cross Europe, or I don't know, just France in a straight line, 150 metres, let's say, might be a perfectly decently sized maximum. So just something to think about there, which brings me nicely on to my last but one point, which is what's next? What is next for me? And the elephant in the room is that I haven't yet done Scotland. It has been done now by Archie and Adam and another guy called Alistair. I discovered far too late, by the way. Sorry, Alistair, if you happen to be watching. Great attempts by both of those. But there's nothing stopping me from doing what I set out to do originally and crossing Scotland. And if I did so, there would be none of this, I have to get it done. This is the beauty of what is to come for me now in terms of straight line missions. That there's going to be no, I have to get this done. I have to beat Archie and Adam, or I have to put this to bed after my 4th attempt. My next Scotland attempt would be, I am sticking right to the line. I'm camping out. It would be about getting platinum, basically, and maybe doing it self-supported, a self-supported platinum, something like that. The antithesis of this, basically. But maybe Scotland won't be next. Maybe I look to Europe and try and tackle countries that maybe I considered not that doable in the past. You know, your Belgiums, your Netherlands. Some of you might be thinking, wait, you've had a baby. I thought you said you were chilling out with the missions. Well, I'm still going to be doing them. But this one was particularly long, logistically hard, and just remote and a little bit illegal and dangerous, etc., etc. So that's what I meant when I said I won't be wanting to do ones of this magnitude. Whatever I do, rest assured that I'm going to have fun while I do it, and I'm not going to be constantly in fear of being caught. Well, I will be in fear of being caught, but I'm not going to let that dictate the mission and ultimately the entertainment for you guys. That is about it, guys. If you haven't signed up to Patreon already, on the $1 tier, you will see all the bonus footage from the mission across England, including the mission to get the phone. And of course, as I've said before, on the $4 tier, so much more content, adventures. Nothing quite as grand as that, but great little adventures that you can watch for a small fee. You can watch them all, basically, for $4. Questions. Give me your burning questions. Make them interesting. Make them from the heart. Don't make them too silly, because I'll have to sift through them all. But yeah, let me know what you've always wondered about this England mission. This is the main focus of the Q&A, I would say. So give me a lot of England questions. They can be to do with the logistics, decisions that I made, or lack of decisions, equipment that I was wearing, clothing. Clothing, I was going to talk about clothing. I'll talk about that in the Q&A. So someone asked that. I will answer a few other questions about maybe what's to come, other adventure ideas, maybe the odd personal one. I'll do a little bit of a mix, but it will mostly be about the mission. So yeah, write out a peach and I may pick it. I won't be able to get to all of them, of course. So thanks for watching, everyone. Hope you found this interesting in some way. And apologies if any of it was either confusing or inconclusive, but that is the nature of this mode of adventure, I guess. It's still pretty fledgling, all things considered, and there's a lot to it. Next up will be a Geo Detective, then it will be the Q&A vid, I think. Take care, everyone.